Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, October 15th. From the San Antonio Express News, my name is Luis Vasquez, and this is your Express Briefing. All of the stories you need to know to start your day. You can expect intermittent clouds and a high of 92 degrees in San Antonio today. Record-breaking early voting, combined with an unusually high number of mail-in ballot returns, show Texas has already surpassed 1.1 million votes, with 3 more weeks of voting still to come. Meanwhile, the state reported more than 4,100 people hospitalized with the coronavirus on Wednesday, its largest total in 6 weeks, and one that comes amid rising infections in El Paso and North Texas. And now let's move on to our top stories for the day. To ease voting during the coronavirus outbreak, counties across the state are spending an unprecedented amount. They've added early voting locations. For example, Harris County has 3 times as many as it did in 2016, hired more poll workers, and created drive-through voting options while stocking up on plexiglass dividers, masks, and hand sanitizers, and more. And it's all coming out of either local budgets or federal funding. In typical fashion, the state of Texas isn't paying for any of it. Texas isn't alone in shortchanging elections, though. Experts say they're underfunded across the country, with counties devoting an average of just 0.5% of their operating budgets to elections, according to one study. Benjamin Wormund explores the results of that choice in today's top story. We're back with 3 more Sunday drives to get you out of your house while you're still practicing your social distancing. This time, we're headed back into the hill country on Interstate 10, so the drives are longer but even more beautiful, taking you on twisty, turny country roads and through small, picturesque Texas towns. We've again included several can't-miss stops for each, and with the help from the Express News Trusty Taste Team, a recommended restaurant to grab a bite. Let Richard A. Marini be your tour guide at expressnews.com or at the link in this episode's description. Federal banking regulators on Wednesday slapped USAA Federal Savings Bank with an $85 million fine for violations of law that were part of a pattern of misconduct. The civil fine stems from a consent order that the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which regulates federally chartered banks, issued in January of 2019. The agency tagged USAA Bank for engaging in unsafe or unsound banking practices. Nearly 2 weeks ago, in a move related to the fine issued Wednesday, the regulator cut USAA Federal Savings Bank's overall grade to failing over evidence of discriminatory or other illegal credit practices. Diego Mendoza Moyer takes a closer look at the latest news at the link in this episode's description. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, domestic violence has been called its shadow pandemic, Elena Ayala writes. It's always been there, though masked as love and protection, but really about power, control, and twisted love. It leads to trauma and sometimes death. A 2018 study found that San Antonio was the 215th safest city among the 224 Texas cities analyzed. In 2016, it ranked 6th among large U.S. cities in homicides and violent crimes. San Antonio has declared domestic violence a public health crisis and is moving to a multi-pronged approach within its new Violence Prevention Division. You can read more about the city's approach and the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence's first Domestic Violence Awareness Symposium at the link in this episode's description. October 13th is the first day of early voting in Texas. Check out our interactive map of early voting locations in Bexar County and visit our 2020 Voters Guide for more information about voting, the candidates, and ballot measures. You can find links to all of these guides in this episode's description. Also, be sure to check out other Express News podcasts such as Puro Politics, In Depth, and the Express News Editorial Board. You can find links to those podcasts in this episode's description. Next up are your need-to-know headlines. You can find all of these headlines and more inside your Express News subscription. Mayor Ron Nirenberg reported 132 new cases of COVID-19 on Wednesday, bringing the 7-day average of new cases to 126. During the city's spike back in July, the 7-day average soared above 1,000 new cases per day. We're tracking COVID-19 by the numbers in San Antonio and across the country at the link in this episode's description. County Judge Nelson Wolf said Wednesday that county officials are finalizing guidance that would allow bars to reopen early next week, as long as they take certain safety precautions. Bexar County voters turned out in force Wednesday for the second day of early voting. Overall, waits were much shorter than on Tuesday, in part because some voters sought out newer, less-known polling sites. In a rare move, Mayor Ron Nirenberg has endorsed Democratic candidate Gina Ortiz-Jones in a tight race in a congressional district that stretches from San Antonio to the Texas borderlands. Restrictions on travel to Texas spurred the International Association of Fairs and Expositions event to cancel its San Antonio convention, the last major convention left on the books for 2020 in San Antonio. Governor Greg Abbott's recent executive order allows bars in select counties to operate in person for the first time since June, but those bars must stop serving alcohol at 11 p.m. each day. There's a new U.S. attorney for the Western District of Texas. Greg N. Soffer was sworn in this week by Chief U.S. District Judge Orlando Garcia at the federal courthouse in San Antonio. Battered by the pandemic-related shutdowns and economic crash earlier this year, the U.S. auto industry appears on the road to recovery. Though a new surge in COVID-19 cases and a political deadlock on federal spending proposals cast a shadow on the industry's revival. Niche released its list of top high schools and elementary schools for 2021. We have the list of which San Antonio schools made the cut at the link in this episode's description. On the day George Floyd would have turned 47, the Joe Biden campaign released a new ad featuring his sister, Houston resident Bridget Floyd. Health insurance companies are offering their corporate customers rebates to offset premium costs and reflect lower medical spending during the pandemic. But it's unclear how big of an impact the rebates might have on the premiums companies pay and contributions their employees make. The Express News editorial board writes, quote, "Metaphorical and literal warning shots about the growing threat of militia and white nationalist groups have been sounding for years, despite attempts, most notably by the Trump administration, to mute these alarms while amplifying lesser or imagined threats." With no political experience, Rashad Lewis won a seat on the Jasper City Council as a write-in candidate in 2017. 3 years later, he's attempting to flip one of the nation's most conservative districts blue as the first black candidate to run for it. A 34-year-old independent logger who lives and works in Jasper, Lewis is targeting young and marginalized voters while contending with a disinterested Democratic Party and his hometown's racist past. He's hoping that the political optimism that has led the party to redouble its efforts in other Texas districts will in some ways also touch Congressional District 36, which encompasses 8 deep red East Texas counties and part of southeastern Harris County. Find out more about his campaign at the link in this episode's description. The McNay Art Museum in San Antonio is opening up a pop art show called Robert, Indiana, A Legacy of Love. The exhibit marks the third time that the museum has cast a spotlight on Robert, Indiana, who is best known for such text-based works such as his love sculpture featuring a tilted O. We have a preview of the show, which can be seen through January 24th, at the link in this episode's description. To celebrate the pecan season, we've baked up 4 variations on pecan pie: a classic corn syrup version, a fudgy chocolate version, a Mexican-inspired version with dulce de leche, and a cinnamon and bourbon pecan hand pie. You can find these recipes at the link in this episode's description. Already in the throes of what, for them, constitutes a renaissance of athletic prowess, the Spurs could be poised to add to their growing collection of runners and jumpers in this year's draft. Florida State forward Patrick Williams might be the best of the draft crop in that regard. Express News staff writer David Hinojosa sets up the San Antonio area's high school football weekend, starting with 2 big games tonight. And who's up for a spooky road trip? The spookiest site in Texas is an abandoned hospital 75 miles southeast of San Antonio, according to Thrillist. And that's all for today. This was your Express briefing for Thursday, October 15th. My name is Luis Vasquez. Please consider becoming an Express News subscriber to get in-depth coverage on all the stories you heard today. Also, be sure to rate and review this podcast inside of your Apple Podcasts app, as it really helps the show. Have a wonderful day, everyone.